Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining. We all are talking and working on COVID constantly, but there are things which are non-COVID, I think, also which are badly affected, and we need to talk about. So I'll be keep looking at my notes, and in the camera, so my eyes will be dancing. Please don't mind. but my so I think one thing is that by now it is a well-recognized fact that the non-COVID related health services have been badly impacted because of the entire focus which has shifted towards COVID. And it is happening at the global level, it is happening in India as well. The reasons for this can be divided into three types. Firstly, the healthcare systems are quite overwhelmed with coming of COVID patients or certain COVID facilities being diverted towards, certain health facilities being diverted for COVID. The second is the measures that have been taken to slow down the transmission of COVID, and that has impacted the existing services. Thirdly, the preventive measures which come into place every year, they have also been impacted badly. So, going to the first part where health systems have been quite overwhelmed. So, even before the lockdown started, we know that certain wards and hospitals and other health facilities were being reserved for COVID-19 patients. But the trouble compounded once the lockdown started. And I will start by giving one particular example of a cancer patient. And me and Priyam worked on it quite extensively. So she's an HIV positive person. She was diagnosed with tongue cancer in early March, and it was so she had been in pain for almost a year, and it took a very long time for the correct diagnosis to happen. And ulcers, mouth ulcers, are common among HIV patients, so initially everybody kept thinking it's happening just because of that, but it turned into a bad sore, and then she has cancer now. So that was found on 16th of March. Her treatment began in AIMS. By saying treatment, I mean the tests were done, and there was a possibility that the treatment will start soon. Also, the doctor told her that she has to be operated upon ASAP as soon as possible. Otherwise, her cancer will turn into a more dangerous stage, stage 3 or 4. It was not that bad at that point. So, considering all of that, and some of us also came into action. But well, unfortunately, that was the week when in Delhi the lockdown started, and by 24th of March, it was a countrywide lockdown. She and the OPD services started to shut down. AIMS OPD services and the cancer hospital definitely wasn't working since 25th of March. And this patient had nowhere to go. She could have gone to private hospital, but of course she does not have that kind of money. Far from it, actually. From 27th of March, she started to bleed profusely from her tongue, and we have seen photographs. She would bleed something like half a cup or sometimes half a glass from her mouth. So it was becoming really bad. The only option was to go to the emergency department of AIMS because that was still working. So they would stabilize her temporarily. She would go back home only to return within 6 hours again to be stabilized temporarily. But she was clearly told that the treatment of cancer cannot begin, and even in other hospitals. So it became quite a dire situation, and it took making noise in the media, making innumerable calls, and a court case to get her the treatment. And she was finally put on treatment. But by then, her hemoglobin had dropped badly. She had lost a lot of weight also. In fact, since for a long time, she wasn't able to speak or at all, or even eat anything. So it was quite a bad condition, and now she is being treated. But that's what uh, this shows, that what kind of problems one can face. And also, now it wasn't just about taking her to the hospital. So when she would sit with her husband on the bike, it was fine because the police would let her go seeing her condition. But if her husband wanted to go home to bring something back to the hospital, that wasn't possible because he didn't have a patient with him. So for that, then we had to request the court, and Priyam will go into details to sort out many of these problems. So it was a problem at so many multiple levels. And then finally, she needed a particular diagnosis. But the machine needs an ink which for that diagnosis, and the ink wasn't available because of the broken supply chains. So she could not be diagnosed. We had to take her to a private facility, uh, paid a lot of money, collected among ourselves, and then did that. And if you start to talk to activists across the country, this is what is happening. It, I guess, in this particular case, I can very safely say that I think 3 to 4 people worked for full time for 10 days to get her treatment started. And if this is what we are, this is where we are at the moment. And things continue to become really worse. If you look at social media and otherwise, cancer doctors are writing blogs after blogs and saying they've never felt so helpless before, and their patients, and I mean, they have never felt so miserable, and they have never seen their patients in so much of misery, where they cannot be treated, and they would have been otherwise. And we also have to remember that in India, in public health facilities and otherwise also, patients with chronic diseases reach at a much later stage, and so they are, in one sense, in an emergency to get care. We cannot wait for a month or two for them. Um, so that's, and the reason again is not only because of admitting COVID patients or making the facilities dedicated only for COVID. We all know the kind of crisis that we are facing from the very beginning with regard to PPE, personal protective equipment. And because of that problem, the Delhi State Cancer Institute, the nodal cancer institute of Delhi, of the Delhi government, it shut down in early April. And that fine morning, all cancer patients were asked to leave. And we do not have really very great referral systems in place where they could be sent somewhere else. Something similar happened with the LNJP, the Lok Nayak Hospital of Delhi, where it was converted into a COVID hospital. And again, overnight, the patients, some were on ventilators, some were in ICUs, some were in nephrology department, and where not, and they were asked to leave. And reportedly, on that very day, the day it started, 2 patients died. One went to Safdarjung, tried, but could not find treatment. So this is happening across, and I think it has to become a huge matter of concern. And just to give a bit of a sense of numbers in this, so the AIMS Cancer Department has a footfall of 2 lakh patients every year, which translates into 650 a day, or we can say 16,000 a month. So if these services were not available, then just in one hospital, one department of one hospital, we have lost so many patients who would have required services. And moving to some other states, so I have data from Chhattisgarh. Um, so the OPD services in Chhattisgarh, the overall, uh, in the last week of March, uh, 2 lakh patients reached for the OPD services in Chhattisgarh, in all the districts combined. It came down to less than a lakh within 2 weeks, by second week of April. It is a drop of 57%. So we have lost 57% who would have come to the OPDs otherwise. And I'm giving more data of states because that is how I have collected it, and I've spoken to people, and it's not a national data, uh, but quite representative, I guess. So, so we are missing a lot of patients, basically, across board. The one other category of patients badly impacted are those who are from blood-related disorder. For example, thalassemic children. Thalassemia is an inherited blood disorder that reduces the production of functional hemoglobin in the body, and such patients require blood transfusions generally twice a month or maybe once in 21 days. In absence of transfusions, their hemoglobin levels start to fall, which can become either fatal or can lead to long-term damage to major organs. And so for these children, blood transfusion is very important. Now, the blood banks are not being able to function because all the blood collection drives have stopped, normally the way we collect blood. So that is happening. And again, it is an additional problem apart from what the hospitals are facing otherwise, right? So to talk about Mumbai has 2,400 such children, and who require regular blood transfusion. All of them are in a bad shape. They do not know where to go. Uh, uh, and then blood and blood products are required required by other patients also. For example, who have trauma or for other diseases. So again, in Mumbai, every day 900 patients on an average require blood. 160 of them are thalassemia children, but then rest are others, and all of them are at the mercy of fate. It becomes really difficult to get donors. And again, now certain things have been put in place, but for the first 2 weeks, you do not know how will your donors travel and come for blood donation. In fact, just last week we were all working for a 17-year-old child who had come from UP to Delhi for treatment and required 12 units of blood. And we were all just scrambling to somehow get blood for that child. But it is happening at this level. So our systems are stand quite broken, and patients are facing the brunt. Um, Again, emergency care has been impacted. Pregnant women who are going into labor are facing a lot of troubles, especially if they come from, say, containment areas. The other day, we all know that Nizamuddin is the most famous contaminated, no, containment area right now. And so the pregnant woman could not come out because the ambulance service could not go in the ambulance, even though the ambulance could be arranged. So those are the things which are happening. The dialysis services, and in terms of dialysis, we can see how the quality of services have gone down. So there is two type of dialysis: hemodialysis and peritoneal dialysis. And hemodialysis happens in the hospital and is a better quality, but again, that is not happening. And uh, even if you are able to get your dialysis done, it is of a lesser quality. um, so this is what is happening. Then the second type I was mentioning is the measures taken to slow down transmission of COVID. Essentially, we are talking about lockdown here because that is the measure that has been taken primarily. So services like tuberculosis, HIV, they have been so badly impacted. I'm sure some of you have been reading about it. So if I talk about TB, then from 25th February to 24th March, that month, just before the lockdown began, there were 1,80,000 reported cases of TB in India. This is the government data. And after that, for 1 month, 25th March to 24th of April, it came down to 57,000. This is a drop of 70%. So we registered only one third the number of cases from the previous month. And it is not because, of course, there are less number of TB patients left. It is because uh, we are not diagnosing, and TB patients are not able to reach, or the symptomatic people are not able to reach to get diagnosed whether they have TB or not. And it is the same issue because of the lockdown. You cannot go, you do not have transport to go, then what do you do? The other types of problems TB patients are facing is, so for TB and HIV, you have to regularly go to a health facility and get your medication, be it public or private. Or in some certain cases, ASHAs collect medication for the TB patients and distribute it. But this chain has completely broken. Patients are not able to go. Private clinics are shut. So even though the government is saying that we will provide in the public sector, reaching the health facility is an issue. Our ASHAs are working on COVID, and definitely in Jharkhand, all the ASHAs are working for COVID, and all the other healthcare staff also. So they are not actually delivering the medicines to the TB patients. And so with TB, it is a double problem. We are not diagnosing the new patients, and the existing treatment has been disrupted really badly. There is also something called injectables. So those patients who have drug resistant TB, so many of them, actually in India, quite a few of them, are on regimens which require regular injections. They are not able to go for injections, and their treatment is badly affected because of that. Um, so a study, an international study, which was by Stop TB Partnership, it shows an increase of thousands of deaths due to TB estimated. And I will show a slide later, so we'll have exact numbers then. But that's what is happening. But even in a Stop TB Partnership, there is one angle that can be added, which is malnutrition and TB are quite closely linked. So if you are undernourished, there is more possibility of getting tuberculosis, and tuberculosis further leads to bad nutrition, leads to your malnutrition. So the kind of hunger that we are seeing, the way the food consumption is going down, all those diseases which are related to malnutrition among children, or diseases like TB, which are so heavily dependent, are so heavily related to undernutrition, they are going to see a spike for that reason also. And we expect that some clinicians in India will soon come up with those estimates as well. How many patients have fallen ill because of TB, or how TB mortality has gone up because of lack of nutrition during this time as well. Um, so, and as I said, that we have to see that how the healthcare workforce has also been shifted. So it is not going to be easy to restore the services, because the government orders have come in certain states for restoration of services, but it can happen only if but if your healthcare staff is continuing to be focusing only on COVID, which will continue to happen for the coming months, then the other services are going to be impacted. So restoration is not going to be that easy. Within this category, another really worrisome thing that has happened is suspension of immunization services. Now, uh, children are not being immunized; those services have been stopped. Again, some states have started, but this gap of 1.5 months is going to cost us dear. In fact, some of the public health experts are quite worried that we may see an outbreak of measles next year. And in fact, they are saying probably in April, because that is the time we see, and it is going to be quite problematic for children. And so our children are at the bad receiving end of this entire deal. Um, so um, coming to the third point, and I think this is an important one that I'm going to talk about, because that is where some improvements probably can be made still, which is the preventive measures that have been impacted. So a lot of us are from the cities, and we know that in Delhi or in Chennai or in other cities, every year the domestic breeder checkers come to check if you have stagnant water in your houses or in your buildings, and sort of make you aware about chikungunya, dengue spread, and all the infectious diseases. Now the monsoon is coming, and just before monsoon and during the monsoon, this is the infectious disease season, right? So those activities are not happening. So for example, in Delhi, those services start in late February. But they started only 15 days ago this time. It is a gap of easily 2.5 to 3 months in Delhi alone. And so we have not put the preventive measures in place. If we talk about rural India, especially the tribal belt, then there is distribution of mosquito nets that takes place, spraying of chemicals to stop spread of malaria, which happens in cities also. That is also not happening. And again, the same issue, that you have the same workforce which is required to do all of this. So if they are working for COVID, there will be less people to work on the other infectious diseases. And I think if there is a still time, and there is, then it should be ramped up as soon as we can. In fact, we are already seeing a spike in malaria in some parts. In Chhattisgarh, there is a major spike happening in certain districts, for example, in Bastar, in Bijapur, in Kondagaon. All of this, you can see malaria just shooting up. Um, so I think that's where we are. And I just forgot to mention initially, but again, there was a very devastating story where an elderly woman, 70 plus, in Mumbai, she uh, got breathlessness at night, and her family wanted to take her to a hospital. No hospital took her in. Finally, one small hospital did, but asked her to leave in the morning because she needed ventilator support. So the doctor said, "You have to take her out. We won't be able to save her." And when the family took her, finally, one hospital said that because she has fever, and fever has come to be associated with COVID so much, though it's a symptom of, I guess, almost all the diseases we know, but it has come to be, so they didn't want to take her in. So the family rushed and got a non-COVID certificate, They got her tested and they got the certificate. They were going to another hospital, and the family lost her on their way. And when I spoke to them, I reported about this case for Caravan, and they said they don't want to give their name because they're very scared, because there are two more elderly in the house, and they were like, if the authorities get angry, then what if we don't get healthcare for them? So it's quite a sad situation there. And I will just share a slide with some numbers. And just one second, I'm doing that. Yeah. Can you see the slide?
Not yet. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so this is so some devastating data has already started to come in. If we look at this, so there are, and all of these are estimates. There, of course, Stop TB Partnership report says that we can expect excess TB deaths. That is more than what usually happen during each month of lockdown, and this is for India, 71,000. So they're saying every month 71,000 more TB patients may die because of the lockdown, and for every month of restoration 40,000 extra deaths. This is quite huge, and this is for India. The other report that has come out from Imperial College COVID-19 response team, it shows for high burden countries, deaths among HIV, PL-HIV, people living with HIV, can see an increase by up to 10%, in TB up to 20%, malaria up to 36%. India is high burden for all these three diseases, but HIV, TB, and malaria, all three. And UNICEF is saying that under 5 children who are aged below 5 years, we can actually expect 6,000 additional deaths a day. This is in the world, not in India, but it will definitely have a huge impact on India also. Um, so just to conclude, I would say that, uh, we are being told, and we are hearing those who work in the health sector who are talking to a lot of other people that, yeah, it's a crisis situation, but it's not just India. Look at the US, the UK, Italy. These are developed countries, and they could not control. How could we? But I think there are other examples also. We have Vietnam, we have South Korea, we have Germany, we have Kerala, which are our own state, which has been able to do a much better job, because containing COVID is going to be very important if you want other services to be restored and be working, right? And Kerala has done a good job there. So in short, I think governance matters, our efforts from the past matter, the processes we put in place matter, the kind of investment in healthcare that we make. I mean, we cannot have, I mean, we've been saying, and everybody has been saying again and again, and that you cannot have a health budget which hovers around 1% of your GDP year after year after year. Every time you sign off that kind of a budget, you know that you cannot handle a pandemic of that sort. What we are left with is to choose between patients. Who do we let die? Do we let die COVID-19 patients, or do we let die other patients? I think our healthcare systems need to do better so that we don't have to make such choices again. And it is going to be a long haul, as we all know. And hopefully we'll do better soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jyotsna. I'd invite Priyam now. Priyam, can you hear me?
Yeah, am I audible?
Yes, yes, I can hear you.
Okay, so I intend to share my presentation as I speak so that it's easier to follow. Sorry. Yeah. So I'm going to start with the case that Jyotsna actually started out with, about the person living with HIV who was diagnosed with cancer. Now, she was having issues with mouth ulcers for about 2 years, but because of wrong biopsy reports, it was only in March this year that the results finally showed up cancer, oral cancer. And she had been visiting AIIMS Delhi for treatment for the past 2 years. And when the biopsy threw up oral cancer diagnosis, she was advised that since AIMS Delhi would have a really long queue and she needs urgent surgical intervention, they suggested that she goes to AIMS Jhajjar, which could probably give her sooner treatment. So this is March 9, and within 2 days, because she is really suffering, she goes to Jhajjar, and Jhajjar suggests certain tests, after which she would have been provided with surgery. But even before she could get those tests done, the lockdown was announced. And because she was desperate to get her surgery done, they decided that they could get the tests done from some private clinics, which could probably fasten the process of getting the surgery done. But getting the test done from the private clinics was also difficult because not only was she not in a position to roam around or go on a two-wheeler easily, most of the diagnosis centers were also not open. And her condition was constantly deteriorating in the sense that she was bleeding, as Jyotsna mentioned earlier, that she was bleeding profusely almost every day, and she was being taken to the AIMS emergency center every day. They would just do some stopgap treatment, give her pain management medicines, and ask her to go back. They did ask her several. They did ask the AIDS authorities if they could admit her several times, but they seemed to be very open about not wanting to admit, saying we are not in a position to do so, and the other centers are not open. And because the situation was very grim, we decided that we could move the Delhi High Court for seeking appropriate medical remedy for her. But the problem was that the high courts were also functioning at a very limited scale. It was not necessary that the bench was sitting every day, so we had to maneuver through figuring out when the bench would be sitting, making the registrar go through our documents first, and showing that this is an urgent matter where we need court's direction at an urgent basis. And the day we filed the petition, the very next day, even before our matter could be heard, she was actually called to the hospital, and they started asking her questions about what treatment has she been given. So we updated the court that she has been called to the hospital, but she was not admitted yet. So by the time while we were still arguing, her paperwork was done, and the AIMS council said, okay, fine, we will admit her. And because of the admission, the court did not give any other adverse orders against AIMS, but did tell them that they have to file a status report. So the fact that the court imposed a measure on AIMS to file a status report ensured that the patient continues to be there till she is healthy or in a state to be taken back home. Because earlier, because of her status, she would be squeezed between her son and her partner. She would be going on a two-wheeler, swinging, and they'll be stopped at several places by the police. They'll have to show their documents, and all this process is very time-consuming. So half the time is spent in maneuvering through the roads, explaining to them why they're going to the hospital. So apart from ensuring that AIMS admits her, the court also directed the Delhi government to ensure that they give passes to them. So earlier when we tried applying for passes, it was very difficult to get them because it was taking its own time for it to be processed. So after the direction, the passes were issued promptly. And we asked for separate passes for the family members, because if the patient herself is not there, then they were being stopped and not allowed to go. So the family members had to be provided separate passes. There was we had to get a separate pass for a driver who could probably take her in a four-wheeler. And then later on in the second phase of the curfew, again we had to ask for the renewal of pass because there was movement allowed in Delhi from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. But beyond that, no, there was a curfew. So in order to get out beyond 7 p.m., in case there's an emergency, we had to again figure out a way of going around it. So, but this is a situation where the individual patient could go to the court, and this is late March, early April order. On April 28, 2020, on paper, the MOHF has issued directions to the states and the UTs saying that the essential services for health should be ensured, including immunization, which Jyotsna mentioned is not happening right now. Treatment for communicable diseases like TB, leprosy, non-communicable diseases including cancer and dialysis. And they also have said that the state should ensure that the health services should be provided during the period of lockdown, which through several reports, we are saying is actually not happening. So there are two situations of how the people have approached the court. One is where the individual patient has approached, which again would be very restricted cases because not everybody knows a lawyer and knows who would be able to help them in such a situation. The second situation is where the civil society organizations who have been approached by patients move the court, like in the case of Sama, who filed a PIL before the Delhi High Court when they were approached by several pregnant women not being provided adequate healthcare services, including the one particular example that they cited where a woman who was living in the red zone in Delhi was not allowed admission in Safdarjung because she was living in that particular area. And she was not allowed admission in LNJP because it was converted into a COVID specific hospital. So during the course of the arguments, the Delhi government said that there's already a helpline existing for the elderly, so that their problems can be catered to during the lockdown, and they suggested that they could use this helpline for providing healthcare services to pregnant women as well. So that has been extended, and the recording these changes that the Delhi government has suggested, the court disposed of that petition. So this is another situation where the civil society has approached the court, but also in some situations, the High Court themselves have taken suo motu cognizance of what is happening. And in late March, one more situation where the civil society together filed a PIL was when JSA went before the Bombay High Court. And they cited several examples where the healthcare services are not being provided as stated. But the government has filed an affidavit saying there are fully functional medical hospitals which are only devoted to known COVID cases. There are multi-member committees monitoring the maternal child care services, dialysis, chemotherapy. And they also have ambulance services that would ensure that these people who need it the most can get to the hospitals or healthcare providers when needed. But the problem is that how do you balance these statements of the government when they say that the system is in place versus reportings of the people saying that they have not been able to access healthcare, which I'll come back to at the end of this presentation. So the Gujarat High Court had taken a suo motu action saying that there is a COVID pandemic and the state should be taking proactive measures in order to tackle the situation. And amongst various measures that the state of Gujarat told the government, told the High Court that it is taking, related to health, it said that all Anganwadi centers were suspended, but pregnant and lactating mothers and adolescent girls were continued being given take-home ration. And this was being given by Anganwadi workers who would go to their houses. At the same time, also have an app. They will get an OTP on that app. Using that OTP, they will get the ration, and then they can go and deliver it. And also they will do real-time data entry of where all they have delivered it. And as for children, they suggested before the court that the take-home ration is being provided at the doorsteps as a replacement for the home-cooked meals. So as per the policy, it is there, but we have to see how these individual people who are being affected by not getting the services can make use of these policies. And very recently, in the styrene gas leak case in Vizag, the Andhra High Court took into account that there is a COVID situation in the country, and the hospitals would also be majorly burdened by the situation. And thereby they said that there should be specific hospitals and local hospitals, and the state should ensure that the local hospitals provide services and make space for these people who are affected by the styrene case. Now, Now there were also other cases which were filed before the Supreme Court, particularly related to how do I do stop screen sharing.
To end screen share.
I can't find that option. Sorry.
Just a moment. I'll take care of that. You keep continue. I'll take care of that.
So basically, there were several other petitions filed before the Supreme Court, including asking for PPE for the healthcare. Thanks, Pranav. Including PPE for the healthcare workers. And in that petition, the court took note of the fact that the non-COVID healthcare workers would also require PPE, but left the direction at the fact that the government could look at possible uh, measures that could be taken to ensure PPE to the non-COVID healthcare workers as well. So there are several suggestions by the court, but per se, no explicit direction in the sense that non-COVID healthcare workers should also be provided PPE. And the other fact is that in most of these cases, whenever the parties have approached the High Court saying that these services are not available, it has not been adversarial in the sense that the state mostly has been cooperative in saying, okay, we'll provide this service instantly, instead of saying that no, it was already into place and they could have gone to XYZ other place. So these are the certain places that we could look at, but the essential problem will be how do the individual patients get the services if there are blanket directions, or if there are simple submissions by the states saying that yes, this is in place, but how do these patients get it despite them being in place? Would they have to go to the courts individually? I don't know, because it would be very difficult for them to do so. So yeah, that's about the things that I wanted to speak about related to court cases and action.
Thank you so much, Priyam. Uh, so I'd like to invite the participants now to put in the questions in the chat box. I think there was a comment by someone. I can't see that in my chat box.
Pranav, just once.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, but Inayat is also online, and she has been working in Delhi and Bombay a lot through this entire crisis. So I think if she can share her experience, that will also be nice. So
Sure.
Inayat.
Hi. Hi, Jyotsna. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Jyotsna. This wasn't planned, so I'm not entirely prepared, but I will share what we've been doing. We also have Sonali on the call, and Sonali, and if Sonali started anchoring this group consisting of doctors, public health professionals, lawyers, general citizens, people who have cars, they become very valuable in these times when public transport is down. And we've been trying to coordinate non-COVID related care for patients in Delhi. And I think a lot of the issues have been covered by Jyotsna and Priyam, but a couple of things that I wanted to highlight was one, it's not that the Delhi government is not trying to do things. I mean, there were complaints that 102 is not working, so they came out with these 3 other numbers that can be contacted, for vehicles. And they said that Uber has given them 200 cars. But still we are constantly facing issues where ambulances are not reaching. They're not reaching on time. The other day we had this patient who had a heart procedure a couple of months ago, and he was in distress, and he needed to be taken to a hospital, and the ambulance told us that we'll take at least 40 minutes to get there, which is just not the kind of time that a heart patient has. And then there was also the issue that GB Pant, which is I think the highest cardio facility in Delhi, was not willing to take him, and they said if you get him to us, so we'll give him medicines, but we really can't do any procedure that may be required. So we're constantly facing this situation where we don't know where services are operational, what services are operational. We've been doing a lot of Twitter campaigning, and we had been raising this demand for a long time that the government should put out a list of services and which of the hospitals these services are operational in. And they did put out this list, but it's not a dynamic list. It's not something that gets updated. And now it's been about 2 weeks, so I don't even know if the list holds true. So there is absolutely no current information on which services are operational, where they are operational, what are the timings. And also there's no referral system in place. So we have patients going to hospitals, sitting there the whole day, and then they just ask to go home. But it is the duty of the hospital to refer patients to a higher center if required. And that's not happening. The other day we had this dialysis patient who had not had her dialysis in 10 days. And she went to RML hospital, and she was there from 7:30 in the morning till about 4 in the evening, and they just didn't do anything. And then the patient had to leave. And all I was thinking was that if you couldn't refer them, you should have at least let them go earlier, so we could have got them to a different hospital, because dialysis facilities shut by about 3:34. So that's one of the things. Priyam, you mentioned the the High Court order, and the High Court order has not been implemented. It's been so many days, and we have not seen any implementation. I mean, there is no helpline that has been extended to pregnant women. The court was assured by the Delhi government that they would set up a system to assist women to reach hospitals, pregnant women, and that hasn't happened. And I mean, all our pleas, everything just seems to be falling on deaf ears. And we've been thinking for the past couple of days, that how do we as civil society get together and push for implementation, because there are so many orders, especially the Delhi government has come out with they've come out with pretty comprehensive orders, but the problem now is that none of these orders are being implemented, and there is absolutely no accountability. So maybe if in the discussion we can talk a little bit about that. And another issue that I want to highlight is that somewhere I feel that advocacy is happening in pockets. So for example, you have some groups who are advocating for needs of healthcare workers, and then you have other groups which are advocating for needs of patients. And some of the demands tend to be in conflict. There was a letter which the United Nursing Association was writing to Delhi, and the demand of the healthcare workers was that it was amended later, but the demand was that all the patients should be tested regardless of whether they're symptomatic or not. Everybody should be considered to be a COVID patient, and they should be tested. And that's a totally valid demand from the perspective of the healthcare workers, because they don't want to be infected. But at the same time, we saw in Bombay that this was being used as an excuse by private hospitals in particular to profiteer. It becomes an excuse for hospitals to deny care. So I think we need to strike that balance. And I think in this entire system, healthcare workers are suffering. I've been working with groups, nursing groups in particular, on raising their demands in Bombay with JSA Mumbai. And patients are suffering, healthcare workers are suffering, and the only people not being held accountable are the hospital management, which is ultimately responsible for both these sets of people. So yeah, I mean, I think if we could brainstorm on how do we take this advocacy to a point where we can push for implementation. The other day I was talking to a journalist, and she's covered issues that non-COVID patients are facing. And the day that RML incident had happened, I spoke to her at around 5 o'clock, and she told me 10 minutes ago I was on a call with RML, and they assured me that they're not denying services to any patient who is coming to them. So now we've been trying to see that how do we then take it forward. I mean, do we write specific case studies to hospitals saying that this patient had come and this is what you did, and we ask them for case by case accountability, or do we ask the Delhi government for accountability? Who do we sort of now target, not target, but address while doing advocacy? So yeah, I think that covers what I had to say. Thank you.